Does THX stand for Tom Holman experiment?
From the moment of inception, the person who thought it up, Jim Kessler, said, why, THX, that's Tom Holman's crossover originally. And, oh, that's George's first movie. We could recognize both Tom and George with one thing. So we changed it some 6 months later to experiment because it was more universal, could do everything with an experiment instead of just a crossover.
How do you see the future of multi-channel music?
Well, as I said, there are only three sensations, and we looked at the history of music from Mozart to Beethoven, from Beethoven to Mahler. We get wider frequency and wider dynamic ranges, and then we start to break the proscenium. And today, movies are built with soundtracks of music that utilize that. They'll do things like have a particular kind of sound going boing, 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 boing between left and right surround, and things like that Mahler could never do before. It's more utilization of the spatial dimension because it is a stimulus that needs response, or that generates a response. We're just back from the Internet 2 conference in Austin, and what we did is pick up a string quartet in one theater and reproduce it in a second, but not with reproduction in mind. What we did is we made it a bigger event than a string quartet normally is. And we did that with picture and with sound. With picture, we used 4 high-definition 16:9 cameras, the small, inexpensive ones, on each of the 4. Now, some people hated what we did, but I thought it was very interesting. What we did is we crossed the cameras so that each of the 4 members of the quartet was seen more or less full frame, full face, not with their eye line toward the other members, not just like you're shooting me here, with an eye line off the camera, but shot pretty frontal. Now, you can't see a string quartet like that in reality because the 2 are facing each other and then the other 2 are facing downstage. So this was a new kind of event. You see, 2 years ago, we shot in Miami, the student, advanced student group there, post-student group there, and we shot one high-definition picture from the back of the auditorium with the orchestra framed perfectly in it, and we reproduced that, the literal approach. This time we took a non-literal approach with that kind of a picture, shown 4 rear projectors floating in black limbo. So the string quartet members would turn to the other screen, in effect, across and bridge the gap across black limbo. We used a 10.2 channel sound system, and frankly, we played it back at a louder level than the original. We had good sound imaging across the front from the 3 front channels, and we produced lots of surround envelopment from electronic processes. So it was louder, it was more sound image than you were used to because you could pick out the 4 individual instruments easily. So you could follow the internal threads or details of the Tchaikovsky or Beethoven string quartets. And we also had it in a more apparently reverberant space. So at one and the same time, you have a sound image, and you have more envelopment and spaciousness than you're used to. One person writing in, this was just in the paper in Austin, said that it was like sitting in the front row of the best concert hall. And I felt that was really appropriate criticism because it was like that. It was more of the same. So what can you do once you have all these tools in place? Well, that's one thing you can do. Now, they filled out a survey. Audiences, 2 audiences exchanged it at intermission, and they filled out a survey about each half of the concert, hearing live and hearing virtual. And we shall see. They asked the most important question of all. Would you pay for this experience? And we shall see.
What do you think about wave field synthesis and other research in audio technology?
Well, you know that wave field synthesis has its roots in the original papers of Bell Labs in 1933-34. They had an infinite array of microphones connected to an infinite array of loudspeakers to reproduce a wavefront. So it's an incredibly old idea. Interesting thing was, in 1934, they came up with how many it took to do the same thing, practically speaking, and the number was 3. Left, center, right. 1933. And interestingly, what they did is they picked up the Philadelphia Orchestra at the Academy of Music in Philadelphia and transmitted it live over long lines to Washington, D.C., where it was reproduced at Constitution Hall. And they had, of course, no storage medium with 15 kilohertz bandwidth. They had nothing that would store 80 dB dynamic range, yet they were able to get that down the big experiment there was the Bell Labs getting that signal over those long telephone lines with wide bandwidth and wide dynamic range. And people were astonished. First of all, it was the first stereo demonstration. And on top of that, it reproduced the frequency range, dynamic range, and so forth. So it was a very great experiment for its day, 1933. So in some ways, I think we just reproduced that experiment in Austin. We added a picture and we added more channels, but how different was the experience for the audience of the time? It's interesting. So it is an old idea. There are some inherent difficulties because of the frequency range of sound. You know, when you design an antenna, when an engineer designs an antenna, they're designing, say, I don't know, a log periodic design from 88 to 108 megahertz. Not a very wide frequency range. When you're designing lens, you have to go to multi-layers of lenses. You wind up with 5 and even 10 internal lenses. Why? To get all the wavelengths of light to land in the film at the same place. That's one of the chromatic aberration, to get rid of the chromatic aberration, and there are others. And that is for less than an octave. It's 4,000 to 7,000 nanometers. And you wind up with 5 elements in a lens, minimum, for a good quality lens. And now you go to sound. You have 10 octaves to deal with. 20 to 20 kilohertz is 10 octaves. And I pointed this out to Yves Ferrugia, who's the signal processing guy, wonderful guy in how you process video signals, and he just thought it was uproariously funny, which is that the product of the frequency range and the dynamic range of audio is equal to the product of the frequency range and the dynamic range of video. Audio is equally as hard. Now, video engineers, and all engineers in general, think they're doing something really hot when they're going, more and more gigahertz. It's all about the gigahertz race. And yet, think about the product of the bandwidth and the dynamic range, and audio is a big problem.